You said the links in the perm debate?
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Can I just get back when you're done?
Yeah.
You can start, but it's
I
just
mean-
like my word just collapsed. So.
1, 3. And I mean, what you're talking about.
Doesn't matter, it's just a few seconds.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, everybody's ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Before we decide to discuss the alternative, affirmative, society has already decided which bodies are not accessible, which body norms are necessary to be incorporated in the discussion, which are not important. The YC decides that forms of mobility are necessary to access the discussion of immigration, that the fiscal crossing mobility, whether it be through the debate committee or outside the U.S., is important and necessary. This migration is not possible for physically disabled people and precludes the question of why we do not let physically disabled debaters actively participate. They also posit independent action as necessary, that each person advocate for their own position when some disabled people are not capable of this sort of interdependence, and this is main 35. They also assume some form of physical normality of embodiment, and while discussion of objection is important, it neglects those that don't have the capacity to be within the borders in the first place, but are firmly outside the focus of society. The other becomes the hardworking, perfect immigrant coming in for the success and possibility that the U.S. can offer for certain individuals, but are never embodied by the physical or mentally disabled individual who cannot achieve normality and is precluded from the given of citizenship, let alone American citizenship. Cognitively disabled individuals are perceived not to be able to be citizens because they aren't viewed as being individuals can make change and interact with a normal individual. Also accept the Campbell 3 evidence. They talk about the normativity of law. The entire what they see is based off of the idea of citizenship and who is not a citizen, instead of looking why the law is as a structure is problematic to individuals. And ableism is key to understand this way that law and the state operates, and also the fact, and analysis of suppression of leave without disability or attempts to cover up the unspeakable disabled body. Davis 95. The years has become commonplace to note the occasions with racism, sexism, the class creeping the bias and discourse and the strain, unaccountable silence when the issue of disability is raised, the sentence of strangers too much, left criticism, the devoted side to the issue of the body, the social construction, sexuality and gender, the disabled body is a nightmare for the very fashionable discourse of theory, because the discourse that have been limited to the very predilection of dominant, ableist culture. The embodiment of the left is a trillion really bodies, the rebellious stop transgression against the phallocentric patriarch. The nightmare of the body is one of the form made, mutilated, broken, and diseased, and the after-perpetuated stigma against disabled people by claiming to be physically and mentally competent. This trades off with the overall methods that challenge the underlying structures of the disqualified people of color and the disabled. German 11. Attributes of physical and mental disability used against them, and immigrants, African Americans, and women. The concept that disability is being used to justify discrimination against others, attributing the disability to them. The most common methods of resisting such strategies and social disqualifications is the claim status of mind and physical competence rather than disability, prejudice, medical designations, while racialized biomedical and psychiatric diagnosis are rarely rejected and exposed. Arguments for resisting misapplied diagnosis writ large, often the effect of solidifying the stigma attached to disability. This comes for attaining equal rights with the one distance and groups of imputation of disability. Then tactically examines the idea that disability is a legitimate reason for inequality, and the factors responsible for making discrimination against people with disabilities. So persistent insistence on explaining and erasing differences provide the production of the way of thinking or racism and ableism, intersecting the process of the exclusion. On to the perm debate. First, in the pro-black evidence, they talk about how people, things are standing in the way of them as a way of and this is a way to use the way that disabled people are, that we have that hard capacity for us to be able to stand, and when we stand, we don't move like most people do, and we are constantly in the way. And the 1AC crossing, they talk about how that is crazy for us to be thinking like this, for us to be looking, to not be recognizing the 1AC. They also talk about the paralyzing, even though they cross it out, they still have cards that justify a political paralysis in the Hampton evidence. They also talk about, many times, about being deported, but not talking about how, deported in the community, without talking about those who cannot even make it to the community in the first place, to even have the opportunity to be deported. And the process of the 2AP, they talk about how the reaction is one of appalled when we talk about cognitive disability of people who are not able to be recognized in the current systems. While these may seem just like rhetorical links, they are more of an understanding of how the world is being framed by the affirmative, to have through ableist notions of how things in normativity should exist in the first place. On the permutation, to affirm To dream with disability is to affirm us to see something as a future with disability in both the debate community and possibly in the outside world. But it is mostly for us to understand us here and how disability can be different. And outside the ableist norm, no explanation. They have no explanation how they can affirm us, nor how you can try how by dropping us it's going to make anything different to the ballot. The ballot is meaningful and decides what type of politics we want to have in debate. We want you to affirm the crip politics and dream with disability with us. And the permutation is a way to thwart the possibility of disability being the center of the community. Ableist sensibilities look for a way to reassert the preference the able-bodied make. Disabled people reject our own embodiments and adjust ourselves to the ableist standards. That's the huge evidence for the one and see. If we win a link, the alternative is mutually exclusive because dreaming disability means rethinking disability in a positive light. And while they already portray disability as being negative, means we have to sever the links to that, making them a voting target and gives them the ability to sidestep any discussion and voter for education. A few things on the line by line. There's not much here. They don't talk about how they are able. They don't know how they say that like the destabilization is able to solve for the state. They don't tell us how they are able to solve for the state in the first place. They talk about how like solvency from narratives is able to solve. They also don't talk about that as well. They say that there's no specific instance. We gave specific instances in the one I see in the cards. They talk about how there's like no ableist language and that they're making active step, but they don't tell us how they're making the active step against ableism. They're just telling us how they're giving a narrative, but they're not saying what that narrative means.
Just because you cross out a line doesn't mean that you're trying to actively fight ableism. There's no mention of disability in
There's no mention of disability in the 1AC or any speeches since, except for just like we're okay with that, but we're not actively pursuing it. And there's an important distinction between accommodation and accessibility. The permutation is always accommodation because it's reactive. The permutation still places responsibility to raise consciousness, ask for our own inclusion on disabled bodies, which mass institutional cost of exclusion precludes meaningful access to debate space. Kroger 10. And because we affirm disability is abnormality, negative individual problem, the false response would be reactive and proactively accommodate disability. Accommodation is reprehensible response that maintains the notion of access to disabled individuals' problems, solve decisions. Why should disabled students be able to take responsibility for the access issues of their institutional problems? Why should academic experience with disabled experience be so different from their non-disabled peers? And the reps point the result. The reps always corrupt the way that people with disabilities are treated.
605.